Yes, welcome in. Badgers nearing the midway point of spring ball. They were on the field on Saturday for the first padded practice. That was practice number 7. Back on the field Tuesday morning for practice number 8, and getting closer and closer to the spring game, which is going to return. I don't know what they're calling it, Jesse. It is April 19th, but I don't know exactly what it is going to be titled. Any suggestions for them? My guess is not the launch.
The practice. Just straightforward.
The
I don't know.
practice.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it's going to look
Yeah.
like, but obviously the chance for fans to watch this team is so important after not having the chance to do it a year ago. It's the only time you can come out and see them until the games start.
And it's even more exciting. I know the transfer portal sucks. People hate it. I get that. But it is a little bit more exciting because you're seeing guys that you've never seen before, right? Like it used to be like you would come to spring kind of looking for some of the returning, whether it's returning freshmen that didn't play last year or early enrollees. Now you have 15, now you have 20 plus transfers that are there as well that you're seeing for the first time in a Badger helmet. So that'll be coming up on April 19th. And I believe it's free for season ticket holders. So that's also another benefit of renewing your season tickets. I desperately need to know the percentage of renewals because in talking to a number of people, a lot of people did not renew. So either way, Wisconsin on the field last Thursday, since we've done a show last Thursday and then on Saturday. And there were a number of things that stood out on Saturday that also stood out on Thursday that I wanted to start with. And it's really, for me, the running back room, because I look at that group and I think a lot of people would sit here and say, it's Darian Dupree, right? Like he's the guy that got into games last year. I mean, him getting carries was one of the reasons, or them wanting to get him carries was one of the reasons why Chez Mellusi was the fourth string running back. You wrote that story. You talked to Chez. He was one of the reasons why, because they wanted to get him some carries and keep him invested and keep him around because they viewed him as the future. And yet when I watched spring this year, he's been good, but I feel like Dylan Jones might be the guy to jump out and be not the guy. I think they're going to share carries, but he might be the lead guy.
It's not a token competition. They're really splitting a lot of reps, and Dylan has gotten sometimes the first reps with the ones. And we didn't see him a ton last year. We did see that big run against Purdue, but they knew what they had when they recruited both those players. Even in fall camp, you could see glimpses from both of them. It was just you had some veterans ahead of you. You wanted to rely on Chez and Tawee Walker initially. On paper, it's easy to say, like you're mentioning, Zach. Well, Darian Dupree got the carries last year. He's a weapon in the passing game. He's automatically number one, and that may end up being the case. But this is going to be a shared workload between those two. Those two are why the roster is the way that it is right now, where there are only 4 scholarship running backs as of now. They moved Jackson Aker out of the running back room so he could be a tight end, H-back, fullback. He can do all sorts of different things. Gideon Atuka was the other freshman that they brought in the 2024 class because they had those 3 freshmen and were able to retain them. Wisconsin didn't sign any running backs in the 2025 class. They really only went after a top-end guy, and if they didn't get him, they were fine sitting pat. They have not added through the transfer portal there because of what they believe they have in those 2 guys. So they right now are the future, but it would not surprise me at all if Dylan Jones ends up being the one. It is, to borrow of Luke Fickell, Mike Tressel term, it really is a 1A, 1B situation, which is a good thing for Wisconsin when you have an offense like this under Jeff Grimes that's going to rely so much more on bigger personnel packages, establishing the line of scrimmage, having a sound run game, and a sprinkling of Cade Yakameli. We haven't mentioned his name yet. I don't want to forget about him. He also has gotten some 1 reps, but it's pretty clear those top 2 guys, the 2 young guys, are the ones that they feel like they want to roll with. But Cade is going to be a factor as well, even if for reasons that are still inexplicable, he disappeared the last 5 games a year ago.
And yet he's still here, right? Like he's still here. And that just, again, he's not the norm, right? Like he's not the norm in this age of college football where you stick around, even though you're clearly not going to be getting the type of carries that you want. You stick around. And I asked Luke Fickell about that. Like, what's the selling point to a guy like Cade Yakameli to get him to come back, because the very few people would be okay with what happened last year, where you're averaging over 8 yards a carry, and there's clearly some issues in the run game where you need some explosive plays in the run game, and you still can't get on the field. And he said it's about who he is as a person, and it is also, he means so much more to this team than people from the outside see, right? So like we sit here and talk about, it's only about when he's got the ball in his hands, but it's about his ability on special teams. It's about his ability as a leader. It's about his leadership within the weight room. Like, there are so many different things that he brings to it. And I'll accept Luke Fickell's description as it, because otherwise I don't know why that he's back. And there's obviously an off-field component to this as well, a personal component that probably has played a factor here as well. But for a guy that is probably could be a starting running back somewhere easily, to sit and be the third guy, and who knows how many reps he gets. I think it says something about him, but it's also kind of just like you never see it these days anymore. He is definitely swimming against, or trying to run into the wind, swimming against the tide. Like, it is definitely something where you just don't see this type, this a guy like this stick around, and he did.
It takes a certain type of person to be willing to stay, especially in this era. If it was strictly about the playing time, Cade wouldn't be here. And Brady Collins mentioned Cade as well in discussing the running back room when I sat down with him a few weeks ago about what he's brought from a leadership perspective. Everybody consistently praises him as a leader, and sometimes that's got to be enough, I suppose. But he is participating on all 4 special teams, I think is what Luke said. And it's not like there's not going to be any opportunities at running back. It's just that they may not be as many as he would want, but to be a valuable part of the team. And you don't know what the internal motivation is as well, because we haven't had a chance to talk to him since the end of last season. I think back to the Bart Houston thing when we were all talking about, why is he still here? He was such a highly rated recruit. And I understand it was a different era before the NIL and revenue sharing and transfer portal and all that. But I remember asking him, and it was like, he was almost like, why wouldn't I stay? I love it here. And so people are all built and wired differently, but that's a component here too. And frankly, those are the type of players, when you say culture and team chemistry matter, that you want to build a team around, because they're here for what you would assume to be the right reasons. It's not about, I'm not getting 20 carries, I'm not getting X amount of dollars, I'm out of here. And you can build something with that.
Absolutely. Again, he's not the norm. And that norm has changed obviously very quickly, but that he's not. So that was one position that stood out. And I guess I'll give him a mention for Gideon Atuka here as well. He certainly looks quicker, looks faster. He slimmed down a little bit. He looks like a guy that could help them in the future, but it's another one where he's, in the same class as Dylan Jones, in the same class, not the same class as Darian Dupree now, because obviously Darian played last year and he's a sophomore now. But I could see him maybe back in the day being a guy that eventually is playing when he's a junior or senior, and who knows if he'll end up staying that long. But he definitely looks the part at that position. The other position that stood out, especially, I would say, and I know you wrote about it after the practice day, is wide receiver, and some of the chance for guys to get reps that they wouldn't otherwise be getting because of injury, or I should say injury and a personal matter, right? Tretch Kakahuna is out for the rest of spring, and they hope to get him back for summer at some point. And then you also have Mark Hamper, who has practiced since, what was the first practice, was the only one that he took part in? Or did he go 2 practices?
It might have been a couple, but he hasn't been around for the last week plus.
Yeah, and Luke Fickell said they hope to get him back soon, and there was some speculation that it was an injury. It's not. It's a personal family matter that he's dealing with, and they hope to get him back soon. But those absences have allowed others to step up and take advantage of it. And I would say a guy like Tyrell Henry has definitely taken advantage of it, and a guy like Eugene Hilton has taken advantage of it, getting more reps, even getting, and obviously Kai and Barry Johnson as well. But I would say Tyrell Henry has benefited significantly from Tretch Kekahuna's absence, just like I think Chris Brooks Jr. has taken advantage of the absence of Mark Hamper. Both those guys, and I'll throw Quincy Burrows in there too because he had a great Saturday. He had this one-handed catch for a touchdown. He had another contested catch for another score. Took advantage of it on Saturday. And the same thing, I would even say Joe Griffin. Finally, we have talked about it a little bit here and there, but Joe Griffin jumped up and had the catch of spring so far. They put it, if you looked at Wisconsin social media, you saw it, a one-hand grab DB. It was a ridiculous catch. But I think those injuries and the absence of Mark Hamper have allowed others to take advantage of it. And I just continue to, and again, I'm not hyping anything up. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just saying others have taken advantage of those opportunities because of guys missing.
Without Kekahuna and without Hamper, that leaves 8 scholarship wide receivers who are practicing. And there have been ample opportunity. If you look and you were to project what it's going to look like next year, you have Vinny Anthony on the outside. We saw what he did a year ago. If Tretch is healthy, he's done enough to show why he will be out there. Well, there's a spot opposite Vinny. There's another slot guy. You're not only going to have 2 wide receivers on the outside. So all these guys are competing for the reps. And most of them have had moments where they've stood out, which certainly is a good sign. If I had to pick of who would be opposite Vinny, I certainly think Jaden Ballard looks like the type of guy who can fulfill that role. He's had some great catches. He looks so fluid, even though he didn't get a ton of action in 4 years at Ohio State, only had 11 catches. It just feels like he could be that guy. But on Thursday, a lot of the reps that they did that were 11 on 11, they put the ball at the defense's 35-yard line. So it wasn't like it was a full move the ball across the entire field. But there were a lot of 35-yard touchdown catches. And then if they put it around midfield, there were some 50-yard touchdown catches. The play of the day probably was, or one of them was the Tyrell Henry touchdown. It went 35 yards. It was a great ball from Billy Edwards Jr., who did not have his best day. I think none of the quarterbacks did. They were all intercepted at least once. But Billy put an absolutely perfect ball behind the linebacker and in front of the safety, and Tyrell went and got it and brought it in for a touchdown. So he surprised me last year in terms of the lack of wide receiver reps because of what he did at Michigan State. But I believe he's going to be a factor. The same with Chris Brooks Jr. and Quincy Burrows. Brooks was getting some run with the ones, and Burrows has made multiple plays. So there's a lot to like about the potential there and the depth. Now, we know every year at Wisconsin, we talk about 7 receivers and maybe 4 or 5 play, but they've got good competition. And Eugene Hilton Jr., I think, is deserving of a mention in this conversation. Even if they're not starting reps, he's gotten certainly a lot of 3 reps, some 2 reps, gotten some 2 reps in the slot too. He just consistently wows me. And I wrote about this off my practice report from Thursday. If you look at the 15 early enrollees that they have, the one guy that I think has stood out the most consistently is Eugene Hilton Jr. I certainly like some of what Carter Smith has done. Some of these freshmen are not getting a ton of reps, or they're only getting reps with the reserves, a handful of them. When he's throwing the ball, you notice him, and he keeps making plays. And he had a play on Thursday. Carter Smith rolled out. Great ball from Carter. He threw the ball across his body, but Eugene dove at the sideline, kept his feet in, and caught it. There's one of those every practice, it feels like.
Yeah, that was impressive because he was rolling to his left and throwing. See, I don't know how often they're going to do that. I understand it. It kind of keeps the defense off guard, but he looked really, really good throwing the ball despite rolling to his left, throwing it the way he did. It was the only place the ball could have been, and it was a hell of a catch too. So it works. It worked for both of them for sure. But you're right. There was some good on that in that Thursday practice, and there was some bad, some questionable decision making from the quarterbacks. There was one throw from Edwards where he rolled to his left and then threw back across the field to the other side. That was picked off by Ricardo Hallman. As you said, every quarterback threw at least one. There were, just again, it's spring, right? I'm not going to overreact to it. There was another throw from Danny O'Neal on Saturday that he threw late and threw behind a guy, and Grant Dean picked it off and took it back. I don't know. Maybe he would have taken it all the way. Who knows? But that's a couple interceptions for him in the last, 3 practices. But I thought Danny O'Neal had a much better day overall, other than that pick. You know what? You know that's how this happens, Jesse. You're sitting there at practice and you're watching a guy and you're like, oh, that's a hell of a throw. And then, oh, that was a really hell of a throw too. Wow. Really started that one, and you're like, God, he's had a really, really good day. And then he throws an interception like that, and you're like, God dang it. I mean, that was going to be a talking point. But overall, I thought he had a really solid day on Saturday. Danny O'Neil did, and he may not have the biggest arm, but he was pretty accurate with what he was trying to do on Saturday. The quarterbacks, I know we talked about them on the show last week. It's so hard to evaluate because it's so early with these guys. I don't know. Has anything jumped out to you when it comes to some of the quarterbacks to this point?
Well, certainly the pecking order in that it is defined, which we knew was going to be the case going in, much like 2 years ago when Tanner Mordecai got here and there was a battle for the backup job. Braden Locke established it pretty early and took the number 2s. But I like some of what I've seen from Billy Edwards Jr. Certainly the maturity and the experience, which we saw when we talked to him on camp in the offseason. I do feel like the offense, the successes that he has, a lot of them are those, and I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, the intermediate throws, the like 10 to 20 yard throws, because you're able to rely more on the run game and some of those motions and shifts when he does throw the ball in that middle of the field. He's had a lot of success, I think. It's just consistency with all these guys. But I would also say, to me, Thursday, there were 5 interceptions total, and all 4 quarterbacks threw at least one. In my mind, they threw the ball more in that practice than they had in any of the previous practices. So we're still learning about these guys as they try and open up the offense because it's all new for everybody.
Yes, it is brand new for the entire offense, and so many new guys both at quarterback, all of them, except for Milos, and then you have how many new guys at wide receiver, but even throwing together for the first time, it's all new as well. And it's always difficult to evaluate spring ball because you're going, was it a great play by the offense or a bad play by the defense? Was it a bad play by the offense, good play by the defense? It's always a little bit difficult with that. But when it comes to the offense as a whole, we'll get into some more details on the offense with some of the listener questions coming up here in a minute. When I look at position battles on offense, certainly the wide receiver spot opposite Vinny Anthony is one of those. I don't know that it matters necessarily because there's so many. They're gonna have a bunch of guys rolling through that spot. I don't know how many will end up playing. Maybe 6, maybe 7. But some of the other position battles, obviously running back, we talked about. Outside of those, the only one that really stands out that's truly a position battle is right guard. And on Saturday morning, or I should say on Thursday, it was Emerson Mandel at right guard. And on Saturday, it was Kerry Kadenko. And right now, am I wrong on that? Was Kadenko Thursday on Kadenko as well?
Kadenko was Thursday as well. So
all right, so he is continuing to be the right guard. But I think that Emerson Mandel and obviously JP Benshall is out right now, but that was going to be a 3-man battle, and they all got first-team reps throughout the first couple of weeks of spring. I don't know how that goes, but if I had to put and maybe we talked about this last week, if I had to put my money on it, I would just sit there and say, I think eventually Emerson Mandel will be the guy there, just because he is the big physical type of player that they want along this offensive line. You can see the size that they have it, and he's definitely got it. And he's probably more established as a run blocker now than he is as a pass blocker, just because he didn't do it a ton in high school. But look, Kerry Kadenko is a big guy, relative, right, to me and you, big guy. Emerson Mandel is a much bigger guy. And that line, if you were to put Emerson Mandel in that lineup, it's old school Wisconsin size for sure. With the rest of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, from a long-term highest ceiling perspective, there's no doubt it's Emerson Mandel. I remember when Casey Raubach was talking to us when he was in the recruiting department. He came down on signing day with Pat Lambert and Max Steinecker to talk about what they'd accomplished. And he was just glowing about Mandel and the physicality that you saw on film. He's got some versatility because when Kerry Kadenko was with the ones at right guard, they would put Mandel with the 2s at right tackle. So he could do both, but you would think projects as an interior player long-term. I don't know whether I would pick him right now because you want the guy who's ready in this moment for this year, and that may end up being Kerry Kadinko. The fact that he's gotten 3 of the practices with the ones from the ones that we've had access to says something, but it may be totally different on Tuesday. AJ Blazek clearly has wanted to rotate all of them on each of the first 3 days. It was a different guy. So I suppose it's a good problem to have. I really think this offensive line, that top group, has loads of potential, and even some of the reserves. But that is the truest competition that they have right now is right guard.
I think it is definitely a competition. This talk of the offensive line kind of reminds me they have had some snap issues, largely because I don't think that any of these guys have spent any time under center in their college career. You know what I mean? So they have had a few snap issues. But I saw this tweet from the assistant offensive line coach, whose name is now I'm blanking.
Is it Zach Heeman?
Yeah. And it's a picture of him taking a picture of AJ Blazek on his knees, right, like underneath to the right of the center and the quarterback, trying to get a video of the snap and the snap process. And it's like he's just in the mix. And I love that about AJ Blazek. He is willing to do it all. He's extremely high energy, but I don't know that you're going to see a ton of offensive line coaches on their knees, face all the way almost on the ground, trying to get a good angle of the snapping issue or the snap, because there have been some snapping issues through the first few practices. There's 7 practices, and there's been some snap issues.
You want to talk about coaches that made so much sense in terms of hires? AJ Blazek to Wisconsin after they were on their 4th O-line coach in as many seasons. Just on the surface and in talking to him, feels like such a good hire because of that high energy, because of what he brings. He's trying everything on the field, off the field. I mentioned this from when I talked to Brady, but AJ showed Brady this video of how many times Steve Nash high-fived players. It's like a 2-minute YouTube video. And the Suns conducted a study one year for the season opener of how many times he touched somebody. It was a fist bump, butt tap, high five, whatever. I think the number was 139. It's in the story that I wrote, but he used that as a point to say there is a parallel here between bringing people together and what you can achieve on the field. And that's why he told his offensive linemen, you've got to do that on every play and play for each other. And some of that stuff may sound cliche, but when you're building a team in team sports, it's so important to have all those little details. And AJ looks at all those angles. So credit to him. And I do like the O-line in terms of what they have and just the better ability to be able to succeed in this offense. For as much as the offense didn't succeed last year, I don't think there were a ton of games where you would pin it on the O-line. They were able to protect the quarterback. They just had poor quarterback play, and it obviously wasn't good enough for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, they gave up, I think they were second fewest sacks allowed in the Big Ten last year. It's that wasn't necessarily an issue. They didn't always open up enough holes run game wise, but the thing about AJ Blazek, you go look at his Twitter, it's either about Wisconsin football or it's about like motivation, and you know what I mean. Like one of his last ones is from this is a retweet from Ray Bone. I don't know, whatever his name is. Talent is just the starting point. Your work determines how far you go. Like, what is mental toughness and how could you build it? And there's like 15 things to do. So yeah, that's who he is. And it's what he believes in, right? It's what he believes in. And it makes a lot of sense for what Wisconsin needs. And yeah, he makes a ton of sense as a hire. I know some people will be like, well, look at the Wisconsin kid offensive lineman going other places. Was he that good of a hire? I don't know that that's necessarily fair. But we'll see.
I would also say Gavin Meyer effusively praised AJ Blazek and who he was and his recruiting ability and said it was the hardest phone call that he had to make. So it was not AJ Blazek's fault. And we've seen what he's been able to do in recruiting, bringing in guys from all over the country, including multiple 4-star prospects, Emerson Mandel being one of them. So I think they've got a good one there, certainly.
Yes, I would agree. All right. Defensively, I wanted to talk about the inside linebackers because I don't know that we've spent a ton of time with them. I will say they have Thomas Heiberger was moved to inside linebacker, and he is now out for the rest of spring. He's got a knee injury, and that's obviously what kept him out or knocked him out of fall camp last year. And he was having a hell of a fall camp last year before he got hurt, and eventually was able to come back and play a little bit. But unfortunate for him, because I don't remember. Do you remember which leg it was that he got hurt last year?
Off the top of my head, I don't. He's been wearing a brace, and it happened on the punt team. He was just blocking on the punt team and went down
On Thursday. Yeah.
And yeah, so unfortunate for him, because as we know, a year ago, as a true freshman, he was in position to play and then got hurt in fall camp.
Yeah. But I wanted to talk about the inside linebackers because I think there's a number of guys that have stood out, especially this past on Saturday. Tackett Curtis looks healthy and looks to be running as much better than he did last year. And they're going to need that. Him and Christian Allegro, they're going to need those guys because they are, with some of the size that they have on the outside, are maybe not as quick as they have been on the outside. You're going to need guys at inside linebacker to chase people down, and that's exactly what Tackett Curtis did on Saturday on one play. And Christian Allegro's been everywhere. His zero is ugly, but his play has been pretty impressive here in spring. And I like that duo. I like that duo a lot in the middle, and they're going to be counted on because we could talk about the size up front and all that good stuff last year. The inside linebackers didn't do what they needed to do either in stopping the run. And again, a lot of it is on the defensive line to keep those guys clean. But these two, if they can stay healthy, I think are. I'm not going to call them like what Wisconsin inside linebackers have been, but they have a chance to start getting back to that standard of what we expect from that group.
Tackett Curtis is just a different player from what we saw a year ago. He had the hernia injury that required surgery. I believe we saw him for one practice last spring. Well, when you're transferring into a new program and trying to learn a defense, the only way to really do that is to get reps, and he couldn't. And so he was slowed by it. And even during the season, I just know he wasn't the player that he's capable of being. That's a guy who was a true freshman, started 8 games at USC, and Wisconsin recruited him heavily. So we knew that combination of Curtis and Allegro were going to be the top dogs just because of the experience and the fact that they were coming back. But there's a lot to like about those guys. And really, I think how they're just utilizing the front in general. You've got Aaron Witt playing a little bit more off the ball, but those two guys are going to be, I'm surprised if they're not your top 2 leading tacklers. Maybe you say it's in Austin Brown or someone in the secondary, but that means you're making a lot of tackles in open space or having to come up. So those are the guys that are going to get a lot of reps, but I don't know what it looks like without Heiberger for whether it's long-term, but you went and you got Turner from Western Carolina, and he's flashed a little bit and made some plays. So They got guys there, no doubt.
I love how quickly Turner gets to top speed. Like he gets going and brings some physicality with it too. He's got a very quick twitch, I would call him, type of guy. So I'm interested to see if like that carries over and he's able to put that to use because it allows you to make up for maybe not seeing something perfectly. If you're able to get up to that top speed and you're able to, maybe you don't have to read it perfectly to make the play because you have that ability to get to top speed as quickly as he does. So he's intriguing, certainly. Absolutely. All right, let's jump into some of these listener questions that I got. We'll start with Scott. He says, of the 37 new bodies along the defensive line and edge, is there anyone flashing any pass rush or backfield disruption ability, or are they all just trash cans full of dirt?
So these are the new guys, the 5 new guys. Well, I think multiple guys have flashed. I don't know if it's a situation where someone's getting 4 sacks in a given practice, which I feel like we saw during the spring a year ago and never came to fruition. I really like, a couple guys, but Corey Walker on the edge at 297 pounds. I think he might end up being the most important of the 5 because of what he means to setting the edge, assuming he ends up being a starter. And they're still working that out. But he's been disruptive. I think a few of them have. Michael Garner has at times too, and he occupies a similar role to what they're doing, with Walker, but Charles Perkins, I think, is one of the guys who's really stood out where you didn't necessarily know what to expect because he came from UT Martin. He can be a disruptive force. So those are some of the guys that certainly stand out. But I mean, I wrote about this on Thursday that like when they put Perkins and Suggs in there, there is a nastiness and a physicality that's why they went and got 300+ pound guys.
Yeah, I mean, I love Perkins, the way that and what he's able to do with he's got a high motor, and he's kind of reminds me of Elijah Hills a little bit. He's bigger than Elijah Hills, but he with that some of that emotion that came along with what Elijah Hills did last year. So I'm not saying he's going to go out and have the type of season that Elijah Hills did, and might not have been great against the run, but he certainly was able to create some havoc pass rush ability wise. So yeah, those for sure. John says the talent level seems to be trending the right way, but what position groups would you say are in the top half of Big Ten teams? So that'd be in the top 9 for anybody that's unaware of how many teams are in the conference. Not suggesting that there's anybody on this show that doesn't know how many teams are in the conference, but go ahead.
Well, now I've had a year to soak it all in and figure out how many there actually are. That is a great question. I think the offensive line ultimately would be considered a top half. It's total speculation beyond that.
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't know. I mean, you've seen what the record's been the last 2 years, and if you had multiple position groups that were upper echelon or top half, I feel like they wouldn't be where they are, but that doesn't mean they don't have the potential to do that. Can the wide receiver group be that? Some of these DBs. I mean, how many programs would want Nasir Forkurian and Ricardo Hallman on the outside? Like, there's a lot of experience at Austin Brown, Preston Zachman. Those guys have a chance to be really good, but a lot of these positions, I just don't know.
It's tough because there are so many unknown, there's so many new things, and so it's difficult to say. I would say like the potential at running back has, I think the potential there for those guys to be top half of Big Ten good is certainly there. Like it sounds ludicrous, like to they're not in the top 9 of the Big Ten, like just because there's so many teams and there's so much talent in so many different rooms, but Wisconsin just hasn't been good enough to be able to just sit here and say, yep, this group would be in the top half, this group would be in the top. A lot of it is projection, and also not knowing. Let's be fair here. There's 18 teams. Do you know the details of all 18 teams and what exactly their rooms look? I mean, I don't. I'm not going to pretend that I do. How many new guys Wisconsin have? 30 plus. Mm-hmm. That's almost every program in the conference. So it's impossible to sit here and say which ones would be confidently to sit here and say which ones would be. But I think the offensive line is one because based on what the experience and what they have done, like, yes, they're probably in the top half, but everything else is probably projection. And also the wide receiver room, when you talk about that, Jesse, and we were talking about this on Saturday, and I think we've actually discussed it as well. A guy who could not get on the field at Ohio State and had 11 catches in 4 years is now in line to start at Wisconsin. Does that say more about Ohio State's wide receiver room or more about Wisconsin's wide receiver room? To me, maybe it's a little bit of both, but I probably would lean toward Ohio State considering the number of guys that they put into the draft and number of guys that they've had drafted in the first round over the last 3 years. It's insane. So I tend to lean towards the Ohio State wide receiver room just being amazing, but there's probably a little bit of that for Wisconsin's room too.
Between the two, I don't think there's any question that I would go with. It says more about Ohio State's wide receiver room. They're ridiculous. He was an unbelievable talent coming out of high school, and certainly, excuse me, that only matters until you get on campus. But yeah, I mean, it's both. But I would lean toward Ohio State because of how many first-round draft picks they've had. To the question, though, about the running back thing, why I think that's interesting, and no, of course I don't know about the rosters of the other 17 teams, but I think when you look at the talent level at certain position groups at Wisconsin, you can more confidently say that whoever these other teams are, Wisconsin has the bodies. My question is, can you be certain there's a 1,000-yard rusher in that running back room? And maybe there is. Is this going to be a listener question?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll save it.
And I want to ask it because it's an overreaction or no question. And I asks, ask every single overreaction question I get. So I'm going to start. I'll go with this one. This one's from Nate. Wisconsin will have a 1,000-yard receiver and rusher this season. To me, if we just limited it to one or the other, I'll break this one up. Overreaction or no, Wisconsin will have a 1,000-yard rusher this year.
Overreaction. I
agreed.
I think that's part of the challenge here. If you're going to determine how good this running back room is, I have no idea how many years, and whether this is fair or not. We've covered Wisconsin for a long time. If you're listening, you've probably been a fan for a long time. How many years did you know Wisconsin had someone who not only was going to get 1,000 yards, but might challenge for 2,000 yards? As absurd as it sounds now, and they may have that. They love what they have with those young guys, but prove it. Dylan Jones carried a handful of times. Darian Dupree was the number 2 and has tremendous talent. And some of those yardage numbers will be mitigated by yardage he gets as a receiver. But I don't know that you can say, even with a change in offense, that one of those guys will be 1,000-yard rusher. Maybe it washes out because they split it and you have 2 800-yard rushers. I think Wisconsin would gladly take that. But it's just different because of what we've seen the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, they have not had a 1,000-yard rusher since Braylon Allen in 2022. Obviously, he was dinged up in 23, and last year it looked like Tyree Walker might be on track, and then obviously things changed for him. But this is the longest stretch that they've gone without a 1,000-yard rusher, Jesse, since it went between 1985 and 1993. So, like, just having 2 years where you don't have a 1,000-yard rusher is a huge gap, I guess, if you're Wisconsin, just because of how good they've been, right?
Very much so. That's kind of an unbelievable stat that all it took was back-to-back seasons, and you have to go back 4 decades. But
yeah,
that's where we're at. So I'm not saying it won't happen. I just don't know how you can say confidently that it will.
Yeah. So overreaction or no, Wisconsin will have a 1,000-yard receiver this year. I think this one is probably easier than the other one.
Overreaction.
Yeah. They have 4 1,000-yard seasons ever. Did you know that?
No. I bet you're going to ask me to name them.
I will not, unless you want to try.
I'm going to try. Can I try?
Okay. Yeah.
Does Lee Evans have 2 of them?
He does.
After that, it gets a little dicey. Is Brandon Williams in there?
He is. 2005.
Oh, man.
And you covered the other one.
Okay. Well, was it Alex Erickson? No.
He's not.
Jared Abbrederis.
In 2013, 1,081. Alex Erickson came up 22 yards short in 2015.
I feel good about how that went.
Yeah, no, that was good. Obviously, of late, closest guy was Quintez Cephas in 2019. He had 901 yards. So, like I don't envision 1,000-yard season for anybody, right? Like it would be an upset. It would be definitely an upset if someone were to get there.
Agreed.
But it's snowing out. Maybe not on your side of town, but I know, no one cares. I think it is a little bit. It's an overreaction. I would say it's a much greater chance to happen for a running back than it is for a receiver.
Without a doubt.
Like, think about the receivers that have gotten 1,000 yards. Lee Evans, the best receiver in school history. Brandon Williams and Jared Abbrederis are like 1-2 in number of catches in school history. So it's a pretty special group at the top of that list that have had 1,000-yard seasons. All right, another overreaction or no question, and this one's a little bit bigger picture for you, Jesse. But Chris asks, overreaction or no, the Badgers will make a bowl game this season.
No. This is like the biggest question because it's whether you can consider this season even remotely successful. I will say, where the 6 wins are going to come from. I'll say overreaction.
It's the over-under is 5.5 right now.
Yeah.
They obviously would have to get to 6 unless the 5 and 7 thing. But I think they made clear this year that 5 and 7 they're not going to. They would not do the bowl game, especially in this day and age where the transfer portal heats up and there's guys No, it just doesn't make sense for a 5-7 team to do it unless your name's Minnesota. But yeah, I think it's an overreaction as well.
I'd like to be wrong because it means, and I'm not going to pretend like it would be absurd if they go 6-6 or 7-5. You're going to have to play at a level that we've not seen at all during the Luke Fickell era. And I know they feel really good about this roster, which they've said every year. It's possible. I think they've got guys who can surprise people, but much like last offseason, you're going to have to show me before I confidently say you're going to do something that I don't expect.
I don't know if you saw it or not. Vince Beagle had a tweet. Did you see Vince Beagle's tweet?
I'm not sure if I did.
It was a picture of Wisconsin's over under the 5.5 wins being set at, and he said, going into the season, Badgers over under 5.5 wins with under being the heavy favorite. How has the new standard and expectation become a 5-win season? These are dark times for Badger fans. No words. ...
And he is Mr. Optimist. I will tell you. I talked to him during last season. I hadn't talked to him in a long time. You know how much he loves Wisconsin, so this hurts him deep.
But I also think it's like it simplifies it so much. Because I feel like even if, say that maybe the 2019 team, I guess would be the last team, like what would they go on in this schedule? They lost to Ohio State. They lost to Illinois. They lost to Ohio State twice, lost to Illinois, and then lost to Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Are we saying that they also would? I mean, would the over-under be higher than 5.5? Probably, yes. How much higher with this schedule? Maybe it's 7.5. Maybe.
Yes, it's an apples to oranges comparison, which I think most of us can see. And I remember when I was talking to Joe Thomas last season because he was trying to make that comparison as well. He said, when I was playing or when we were playing, you knew you're going to have a couple hard games a year. Maybe you played Penn State and Ohio State and you also had to beat in Iowa. And that's not what Wisconsin has. This may be the most epic schedule they've ever faced. It may sound like prisoner of the moment and hyperbole, but when all is said and done, you never would have scheduled the Alabama game if you knew what the Big Ten was going to look like. You obviously have to go to Oregon. You've got to play Michigan at Michigan, a Minnesota team on the road that obviously, you should beat a lot of years, but haven't. Indiana, which just went to the playoff and no one expected. And then you got to come home and play Ohio State and Iowa. And might have mentioned this previously, but you look at the Big Ten teams that they've got to play and not easy. A lot of them were pretty good this past season.
Yeah. And I'll throw this tweet in with the conversation we're having from Beers and Tacos. Said, can we all admit that PC's later teams had no chance of competing with the schedule like they have now? Fickell hate is disgusting. The man took over a roster filled with guys that had zero fight and lost a starting QB 2 years in a row. Give me a break. His hashtag is also fire guard. So
I would assume that's sarcasm.
It's not. They got into I don't need to get into it, but there was an extensive back and forth, not by me, but in my mentions over that. But Adam says, I've been on the complete opposite side until now, but I think actually Greg Gard has done a better job adjusting to the portal and NIL than Fickell, which is unreal for the amount of money the football team spends. Not really a question, but an observation. I think it's also different simply because instead of having to replace 20 guys, you replace 4, 5 sometimes.
Well, we'll have to save most of this conversation for the swing, which we, of course, are going to do.
We are. It's coming this week. I promise. Yeah. Now that we know some of the guys that are going to for sure know some of the guys are going to be here.
I mean, I don't think there's any question when you're trying to make this comparison. At least in the last couple of years of the portal NIL era, you brought in all Big Ten player in AJ Storr, and then he left, and you brought in someone who ended up being an All-American, and you completely changed your offense to make it more appealing, and you've just brought in 3 guys that were top of the board guys who you were able to succeed in early, the exact opposite of what ended up happening last year, where you were kind of striking out early and people were worried. So if you want to look at football, and maybe this is for an off-season show, you want to talk about the hits and misses, because I think a lot of times you evaluate a high school recruiting class on that 5 years later, who ended up being a hit or a miss. And out of the portal, you've had some good guys, and you've had some guys that you would say didn't end up being anywhere close to what you thought. If you had more of those difference makers, you'd be a better team. But it is harder. It's certainly harder. But you could also make the case that a miss in basketball is magnified more. Yes, they missed on Hunter, but if you missed on all three, you'd be in trouble.
Yeah, they hit a home run with one. I shouldn't say a home run. Hit a grand slam with one in John Tonje. Hit a double with Xavier Amos, and we'll see, whether he's able to make it into a triple or a home run based on what he does the rest of his time, assuming he's back. And then obviously Cam Hunter, no. But the three guys that you have coming in are, I would say, more established than what they brought in last year, right? Just simply because John Tonje was hurt and didn't barely play the year before and had never showed the ability. I mean, he was good at Colorado State, but had never showed the type of ability they showed this year. And then you have Amos, who did it at a lower level, kind of like Rapp. I guess maybe the MAC is better than where Portland plays, but Reed's done it at a final. Boyd's done it in a Final Four, played in a Final Four. So like he has shown that ability more so than Cam Hunter, obviously. So they have improved. I'm sorry, we are getting into swing stuff. Yeah. That's my bad. All right, we got a couple quick hitters here for you, Jesse. From Beers and Taco says, will we see design QB runs this year with Billy Madison / Billy Edwards?
Yeah, probably some.
Don't like
I know you don't want to risk getting him hurt, but I would say they are doing a lot of different things in terms of getting the ball out of the backfield, and I'd imagine he'll be part of it.
Yeah. Will Wisconsin average more than 1.3 sacks per game in 2025?
Was that the number a year ago? Or is that high?
I think that's what they averaged last year.
Well, if it's any lower, woof. So I will say yes. Now, the next question would be, where's it going to come from? That's a good question. Yeah. I just think they'll be better.
Is Jaden Ballard the best receiver Wisconsin has had in the past couple of years in terms of raw ability?
I mean, Will Pauling, I don't know how you raw ability and potential. I like what he can offer, but what Will Pauling did is 74 catches. Is that what it was? First year he was here?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I can't go with him and my biases in the stats.
How much noise has Nick Clayton made this spring so far?
I've been asked about him a couple of times, and the answer would be not very much, just because his reps generally seem to be coming with the threes and the young guys. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have loads of potential. I mentioned before, if there's 15 early enrollees and Eugene Hilton Jr. is still the most, how many of those guys realistically have gotten enough run for you to make a determination? Now, some of that would be what you've done early on to get more, but the answer is not very many. Carter Smith is getting a lot of the 3 reps at quarterback because they have 3 scholarship quarterbacks. Eugene Hilton Jr. has stood out the most. We mentioned on the last show, Grant Dean and Luke Emmerich both had an interception last Tuesday, but the majority of their reps have been young guys and some twos. Beyond that, Nolan Davenport's getting 2 reps at tackle. I would say a lot of those true freshmen, though, are still just working their way in because it's their first couple weeks in a college uniform.
Travis says, what offensive unit do you think we will see the biggest step forward in 2025 from 2024? Not necessarily the best unit, just the biggest improvement.
It better be quarterback. I mean, really, I think if they can stay healthy, I think that it's a good spot for Billy Edwards Jr. So maybe that's such a low bar that people are like, well, whatever, but kind of the most important position on the field.
This is kind of not Travis's question exactly, but it was like, we don't believe the Badgers will surpass the over-under of 5.5. How long realistically do you think that it will take to get back to 8+ win seasons? And I'd like to actually ask that question, whether Luke Fickell will ever win 8+ games.
Well, if it's going to happen, it better be in year 4, which is not easy because they got to play Notre Dame, but certainly more manageable in 2025. We've said this several different times, but let's say they don't make a bowl. I think how you play and how you lose matters a lot. Are you close? Are you right there? And I realize you can say, well, they were close against Penn State and they were close against Oregon, but you also got the doors blown off you in embarrassing fashion on multiple occasions. So, and this schedule is even more difficult. I don't think it's impossible in year 4. I think it's impossible in year 3, though.
Ross, this is the last one. Ross says, with the second hardest schedule in D1, can we see improvement, or will the opponent's talent mask what Wisconsin improves in?
Both. I think you've got to see improvement. But at the same time, you've got to go to Tuscaloosa and obviously all the other teams that we've mentioned. It makes it harder to see what we saw during that 3-game winning streak last season where you're beating bad teams. It's like, oh, have they turned a corner? And then you went and played halfway decent teams and really good teams, and you saw that they hadn't.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, Wisconsin back in the field on Tuesday morning. We'll be back later this week with maybe some of what we saw there. The swing happening this week. Promise. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there it is. Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp